This week on the Black Man with a Gun Show podcast, we're going to talk again to my friend and brother Todd Jarrett. And he's going to talk about the STI gun and the giant elephant in the room, racism. Folks don't like to talk about it. But do you know we've had race riots in this country since 1898? Yeah, a little history to help us frame and understand what other folks are going through when we're trying to evangelize about the rights and the freedom that we all have.
BlackManWithAGun.com, Kenn Blanchard's Pro-Gun Podcast.
So let freedom ring from the prodigious hilltops of New Hampshire. Let freedom ring from the mighty mountains of New York. Let freedom ring from the heightening Alleghenies of Pennsylvania. Let freedom ring from the snow-capped Rockies of Colorado. Let freedom ring from the predacious slopes of California. But not only that, let freedom ring from Stone Mountain of Georgia. Let freedom ring from Lookout Mountain of Tennessee. Let freedom ring from every hill and molehill of Mississippi. From every mountainside, let freedom ring, let freedom ring, let freedom ring.
This portion of the show is brought to you by Black Man with a Gun Reloaded. You can get your autographed copy from me directly by emailing me at blackmanwithagun@gmail.com for only $20. Black Man with a Gun Reloaded is an autobiographical book about gun control, how I became a trainer, an activist, a speaker for the Second Amendment. The book has a glossary to make you sharper. It belongs on the book of every gun owner. Black Man with a Gun Reloaded. Email me at blackmanwithagun@gmail.com today. Also available on Amazon. Without the love. And now, a little history. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. You know, that sounds really good. Somebody ought to write that down. If you look around, brothers and sisters, there's a little bit of struggle and strife in the land. Folks are still trying to figure out gun rights and gun control, and race becomes a big part of it. When I started writing Black Man with a Gun back in the late 1990s, a responsible gun ownership manual for African Americans, the first one, I thought it was going to be just an updated version of Robert F. Williams's Negroes with Guns, with my own little flavor to it. And then when I created the website, blackmanwithagun.com, way back in 2000, I just knew that after a couple of years, it would be a cute joke. We got over it, and the race thing would have been over. How wrong I was. If you are involved in gun rights, if you're involved in fighting for the freedom of other people, you're going to come across this racism thing quick. People learn to be whatever their society and culture teaches them. We often assume that it takes parents actively teaching their kids for them to become racist. But the truth is, unless parents actively teach their kids not to be, they will be. Discrimination in the United States is in every aspect of our life and is in every community. While the nature of the views held by average Americans has changed significantly over the past several decades, we are basically the same as we were decades ago. Maybe not you, but others having discriminatory viewpoints. Yes, we are created equal, but we like to put each other in a box. A box of, I'm better than you, I know more than you, I got more than you, all that kind of stuff. It's natural, but it's not right. And depending on how much you troll the internet, you can find pockets of forums still out there where people are still bracing and preparing for the race war on both sides, both black and white. Fear of a race war actually has sold more guns than anybody has statistics for. And it's just going on a unscientific thing of just listening to people talk reading their posts, checking out ground truth in different areas. The best news is it's not you and me that we're worried about. It's everybody else. There are a lot of people out here that don't know that there has been race wars in the past. Yes, there has. I was really surprised this past week when the Washington Post had an article about 1919's Red Summer. And I thought, wow, what made you want to do that? We have a lot of history that's not real pretty. I'm going to share some with you right now that maybe you've never heard of before. And why? Why do that? Well, one thing is if you don't know your past, you don't know your future. If you think that you are inventing something that's new and you're not, you can waste time. And if you can appreciate how far we've come from where we've been, that helps. And if you can understand that human mentality and our culture and society and our fears and our issues are still the same. And when you can recognize the trouble spots, then you can fix it. I personally don't have any answers. I wish I did. I wish I could just get on camera down here in my little studio and preach to the nation and then they would listen and we'd get all straight after that. But the best thing I can do is to share what I know with you so that you can spread the knowledge, so that you can share this podcast, so that you can share conversations so that together we can do better. Let's go back to 1898. While Democrats held power at the state level in North Carolina, a coalition of white Republicans and African Americans controlled politics in Wilmington, North Carolina in 1898. I said 1898. A group of Democrats sought to remove blacks from the political scene and launched a campaign to do so by accusing black men of sexually assaulting white women. A prominent black newspaper editor by the name of Alex Manley responded with an editorial suggesting that it was possible that relations between white women and black men were consensual, which was so taboo at the time. About 500 white men attacked and burned Manley's office. 14 African Americans were killed in the violence. 1906, Atlanta, Georgia. Racial tension had been building in Atlanta in 1906, and race baiting in the state's gubernatorial election brought it to a boil. Blacks in Georgia had begun to prosper economically and socially, and the Democratic candidates for governor, Hokie Smith and Clark Howell, played on whites' fear of a rising black middle class. Anti-black violence broke out in September after 2 newspapers printed stories about black men assaulting white women. Most of the allegations were false. About 10,000 white men and boys took to the streets beating black men. Between 25 and 100 blacks were killed and hundreds were injured. 1917, East St. Louis. Several thousand African Americans seeking employment opportunities moved to East St. Louis, historically a white city, from the South during World War I. Then on July 1st, a black man was rumored to have killed a white man. Anti-black violence followed, with whites shooting, beating, and lynching African Americans. Arson against African American homes also occurred. The violence continued for a week. Estimates of death range from 40 to 200 African Americans. In addition, some 6,000 blacks fled East St. Louis. 1919, the Red Summer. Race riots erupted in 26 U.S. cities during the course of the year, including Washington, D.C., Knoxville, Tennessee, Longville, Texas, Phillips County, Arkansas, Omaha, Nebraska, and Chicago. Many of the riots occurred during the summer months, in what is known as the Red Summer. Racial tension was particularly bad in northern cities as white soldiers returning from World War I found that their jobs had been taken by African Americans who had migrated north to take advantage of employment opportunities. In addition, black soldiers returning from war became embittered by the lack of civil rights extended to them, particularly after they had risked their lives fighting for their country. Chicago experienced the most violence. On July 27, 1919, Eugene Williams, a 17-year-old black man, was swimming with friends in Lake Michigan and entered into a, quote, white-only area of the water. A group of white men threw rocks at Williams. He was hit in the head and drowned. Police refused to arrest the man who threw the rock. In fighting between white and black gangs, erupted in Chicago's South Side. The violence escalated and the state militia was deployed. Fighting continued until August 3rd, and 15 white people and 23 blacks were killed. About 1,000 black people lost their homes to arson. It flowed into small towns like Elaine, Arkansas, in medium-sized places such as Annapolis, Maryland, and in Syracuse, New York. Beyond the lives and family fortunes lost, it had far-reaching repercussions, contributing to generations of black distrust of white authority. But it also galvanized blacks to defend themselves and their neighborhoods with fists and guns, reinvigorating civil rights organizations like the NAACP, and led to a new era of activism. It gave rise to courageous reporting by black journalists and influenced a generation of leaders who would take up the fight for racial equality decades later. The people who were the icons of the civil rights movement were raised by the people who survived the Red Summer. For all of that, there was no national observance marking Red Summer. History textbooks basically ignored it, and most museums don't acknowledge it. And the reason? Red Summer contradicts the post-War I era notion that America was making the world safe for democracy. It just doesn't fit into the neat stories we tell ourselves, said David Kruger, author of 1919, The Year of Racial Violence, How African Americans Fought Back. In 1919 alone, violence erupted in such places as New York, Memphis, Tennessee, Philadelphia, Charleston, South Carolina, Baltimore, New Orleans, Wilmington, Delaware, Omaha, Nebraska, New London, Connecticut, Bisbee, Arizona, Longview, Texas, Knoxville, Tennessee, Norfolk, Virginia, and Putnam County, Georgia. In the nation's capital, white mobs, many made up of members of the military, rampaged over the weekend of July 19th through the 22nd, beating any black they could find after false rumors of a white woman being assaulted by black men spread. How many times have you heard me say that today?
Hey, where are the white women at?
Forgive me for that. I just couldn't resist. So in 2019, I'm still sensitive to both sides. I'm sensitive to those who haven't a clue of what we've gone through, having a clue that we still have a long way to go, having a clue that when they say certain things, it invokes the spirit, the evil spirit of days gone by. And way too many of us take this stuff for granted. We need more adults to stand up and have a conversation about our past, about our present, and about our future. Can I get an amen, somebody? Now, you might not know it, but I could keep going. 1921, there was Tulsa, Oklahoma. The Greenwood section of Tulsa, the wealthiest black community in the country, erupted in violence on May 31st and June 1st after a young white woman accused a black man named Dick Rowland of grabbing her arm in an elevator. Rowland was arrested and police launched an investigation. Accounts of the assault were exaggerated, and a mob of armed white men gathered outside the Tulsa County Courthouse. The sheriff enlisted officers to protect Rowland, and an armed group of black men went to the courthouse to protect Rowland. Gunfire was exchanged between the groups, and violence intensified. Many of the black people retreated to the Greenwood neighborhood. Whites followed, burning and looting the buildings and the homes. About 1,250 homes were destroyed. The Oklahoma National Guard was called in and imprisoned some 6,000 black people. There were reports that whites fired on Greenwood from planes. Reports of fatalities vary, but the state of Oklahoma reports that 26 blacks and 10 whites died. A report released in 2000 by the Tulsa Race Riot Commission said about 300 people died. But wait, there's more. In the 1940s, Detroit, a segregated city, was a hotbed of racial tension. On a steamy evening in late June, a fistfight broke out between a black and white young man at an amusement park called Belle Isle. The fight quickly grew into scope and intensity. The violence escalated when rumors about violence against white and black women circulated, and both whites and blacks engaged in retaliatory acts. Homes and businesses were burned and looted, and people were beaten and shot. The fighting raged for 3 days, and 6,000 U.S. Army troops were brought in. 25 black people and 9 whites were killed. About 700 were injured. Watts, California. A predominantly black neighborhood in Los Angeles erupted in riots that lasted from August 11th to the 17th in 1965. After the arrest of 21-year-old Margaret Fry, a black motorist, by a white highway patrolman, Lee Minkus. Racial tension had been on the rise in Los Angeles and particularly in Watts because of years of discrimination and racial injustice. A crowd of African Americans gathered and watched as a scuffle broke out between the police, Fry, his brother Ronald, and their mother, Rena Price. Ronald and Price were also arrested. The number of people gathering increased, and the crowd of black onlookers threw rocks and concrete at police. Nearly 4,000 National Guardsmen were deployed, in addition to about 1,600 police officers. Martial law was declared and curfew implemented. More than 30,000 people participated in the riots, fighting with police, looting white-owned homes and businesses, and attacking white residents. The riots left 34 dead, more than 1,000 injured, and about 4,000 arrested. 1967, Newark. Black residents of Newark, New Jersey felt disenfranchised and that they were the victims of racial profiling, creating a palpable sense of racial tension. On July 12th, John Smith, a black cab driver, was arrested for improperly passing a police car. He was taken to a police station across the street from a public housing project. Residents of the project reported that Smith was seriously injured and was dragged from the police car into the station. They reported the event to several civil rights groups who asked to see Smith. They requested that Smith be taken to a hospital for treatment. Word of the incident spread, and black leaders organized a peaceful protest. However, that protest turned violent, with black demonstrators throwing bottles, rocks, and Molotov cocktails at the police station. Rioting followed for the next several nights, and the National Guard was deployed. Despite the presence of the National Guard, the violence and looting continued for 3 nights. The worst rioting in New Jersey's history left 26 dead, 725 injured, and about 1,500 arrested, and more than $10 million in property damage. And this is the last one for today, but there's others actually that happened after this. 1968, the King assassination riots. Riots broke out in about 125 cities following the April 4th, 1968 assassination of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. in Washington, D.C., Chicago, and Baltimore. There they experienced the most violence. In Washington, I was here. Violence broke out hours after the assassination. On April 5th, looting, arson, and attacks on police increased, and as many as 20,000 people participated in the riots. The National Guard and Marines were dispatched. The riots reached within 2 blocks of the White House. 12 people were killed, more than 1,200 buildings were destroyed, and damage was tallied at $27 million, leaving the district's economy in tatters. Rioting in Baltimore began April 5th. Maryland's Governor Spiro Agnew called in the National Guard and later needed to dispatch federal troops to help control the violence and the looting. Rioting continued until April 14th. 7 people were killed, 700 injured, and about 4,500 were arrested. In Chicago, rioting took place over a 28-block area in Chicago's west side. As in other cities, rioters looted stores and homes, set buildings on fire, and broke windows. In addition to some 10,500 police officers, about 6,700 members of the National Guard, and 5,000 federal troops were deployed. 11 people were killed in the violence, and 2,150 people were arrested. These were my parents, my uncles, my aunts, my grandparents. This was their generation. My stepfather came home with his teeth missing and a nightstick in his hand that he had taken from a police officer. I still have the nightstick. The Second Amendment, the U.S. Constitution, the right to keep and bear arms, fighting to keep our ARs, our revolvers, our semi-automatics, our sporting rifles, all of that is all connected and tied to these stories. Where do we go from here, family? What do we do to change?
Being an armed citizen means having a gun with you all the time. Carrying a firearm every day requires a holster that is both concealable and comfortable. Whether you choose our Super Tuck Deluxe or Mini Tuck, you'll have the confidence that comes from being discreetly and comfortably armed, prepared to face unforeseen dangers. Crossbreed holsters are handmade in the USA, come with a lifetime warranty, and a 2-week try-it-free guarantee. Order your holster today at crossbreedholsters.com.
All right, next up is part 2 of my conversation with pro shooter and friend Todd Jarrett. This week, you're talking about the STI pistol and more. Not that long of a segment, but we got part 3 coming up next week to continue the flow. Are you ready for it? I had a question about STI. That's like your newest thing, right?
Yeah. We want to talk about STI. I mean, I went to work for them. I was with Black Hawk for 15 years. So I went to work for them in 2004, and they had some regime change at Black Hawk, and they let a bunch of us go, and I had to be wrapped up in that. And so I needed a job. I wanted to get back in it, even though I was working for several people in the industry. And Seymour Systems, which is a Red Dot company, out of Warrenton, Virginia. And so I went to SHOT Show this year, first time in 29 years that I didn't have to work a booth, every single day and nonstop dealing with customers. So I got to walk the floor. So I got to walk the floor and took a resume around, and it didn't take long for somebody to go, "Hey, lie down and see me. We're interested in talking to you." So I think I ended up 6 different companies end up sending resumes out, and or they wanted me to come see them after I talked to a bunch of folks and kind of knew the people in the industry and who was going on. So STI called me up and flew to Georgetown, Texas, and they said, "Hey, Todd, guess what? It looks good. Here's what can you do for us?" And I told them, and they go like, "Can you start tomorrow?" I went, "Of course." And so, of course, I had researched the company and had known about the company for 25 years, knew some of the prior owners, knew the history of how the gun was built, designed from Chip McCormick many years ago. And so, I went to work for him, and I'm, doing everything from dealer programs to marketing to new products to dealing with vendors to dealing with, OEM manufacturers out there who are, making some of our parts. And but we are pretty much doing almost everything in-house. When it comes to STI, if you have not seen an STI product, you really need to get your hands on one, because you're going to be pleasantly surprised at what you are getting for the value. So it is a completely new company. It was sold off about a guy named Dave Skinner passed away and sold the company off a few years ago. They did bring in a new manager, a new president. It didn't work out like they wanted. And so the company bought them out about almost 2 years ago now. And they basically ripped out all their old CNC machines. They ripped out all their old equipment, dropped in brand new stuff, bring in new operators, new management, new people running the shop for us, putting firearms together, and they're just doing some kick-ass work. I mean, so a competition gun that you would buy that may cost $6,000, $7,000, $8,000, $9,000.
Okay.
That gunsmiths are doing now. Guess what? They're doing it for $3,000, and you're getting that kind of a quality and that kind of a quality product right off the shelf now. Pretty unbelievable. So I'm pretty pumped about being with them, because I want to be. If I work for a company, I want to make sure that company has got legs and it's going to have some value down the road, not be going in the wrong direction. Yeah. And I felt that they are. So so I'm also working for Hoppies too.
Okay.
They are a major player in the industry in the cleaning supplies, and they're just some of the best people. It's kind of like, Ken, the people in this industry. You run across them and you go like, they're just like super squared away people, and you go like, oh man, these are some of the coolest people, Yeah. But the public doesn't know that. They know Hoppies for Frank Hoppies, who started the business back in 1903,
right? And
it's been a name brand for all those years. But if you meet the people who are running the company, you're going like, oh, these are fun people. They like to go shoot. They like, doing everything from hunting to fishing to being involved in the industry. And so they picked me up to help out new product development, since they, and of course they're using my name out there, but I didn't do it just to be for the money. I mean, I'm doing it because I like the people. I mean, the people mean more than anything. But if you're not helping the customer and you're not providing service for the customer, then I'm not your guy. I'm a long-term individual who likes to be with companies for years. And I mean, I've been in the industry for 29 years, going on 30 years next year. And so I've been one of the few guys who've been, I would say, loyal to companies that I'm with for a very long time because of their mannerism and how they build a product for the customer and stand behind it. And that's where I want to be. I mean, that's all I've ever wanted to do over the years is make sure we build a product that's going to be worthy and, for the customer, not build some junk. And there's a lot of junk being made out there, for sure. So.
A lot of junk indeed. We're going to catch up with Todd again next week for part 3.
Are we the meanest? Are we the prettiest? Are we the baddest mofo low down around this town? Are we not the supporters of the black man with a gun? I can't hear you. Patreon.com/black man with a gun.
Quick shout out to the 26 supporters of this podcast. I'd like to get 26 more if possible so I can fund this equipment purchase that I'm about to do. Tripod and a iPad that's all set up so that you can do a mobile kind of a television thing going on. I got big plans this fall for this podcast and the YouTube channel, but I can't do it by myself. And I'm hoping I can take this mobile unit with me if I can afford to make it to the GRPC in Arizona. So if you are not a supporter, please consider it. I wouldn't beg you if I didn't need it. Thanks. All right, as I wrap up this week, I want to remind you that firearm safety depends on you. From the time you pick up a firearm, the shooter becomes a part of a system over which he or she has complete control. You are the only part of the system that can make the gun safe or unsafe. In case you didn't know it, hunting and target shooting are among the safest of all sports. You can help meet this responsibility by enrolling in a safety class somewhere at local range. Even if you've been involved in this stuff for a long time, you must constantly stress safety when handling firearms, especially to children and non-shooters around. Newcomers in particular must be closely supervised when handling firearms. And don't be timid when it comes to gun safety. The life you save may be your own. If you are part of Instagram, check out my new page at Papa Cap, and that's PAPPACAPP. And I'm having a blast with that, just doing some new stuff. Letting my hair down a little bit, being a little wild and crazy. If you want to reach me, if you need to reach me, if you want to send me some comments, some feedback, I need the feedback. I need some commentary. If you want to give me direction, want to help me with the cause, you want to do something with this show, you're welcome to. Yeah, you are. Just let me know. We'll talk about it. And just in case you didn't know it, this is your friend and your brother from another mother, the Reverend Kenn Blanchard, the pastor of Patriots, Pistoleros, and Paladins, wishing you peace. Shalom, baby.
Until next time, friends.
To keep in touch with Kenn and his cause, head over to blackmanwithagun.com.
Blanchard.media.